Welcome back to Philip's African Dialogues, where we're discussing Africa's retail reality and the rise of the African consumer. Still with me in studio, Paul Hobden, Senior Sector Leader at Philip's Consumer Lifestyle Africa, Mark Turner, Director for Africa at Massmart, and joining the conversation is Peter Alistoffer, Managing Director and Co-founder of Zando, and Derek Engelbrecht, a Partner and Lead Director for Retail and Consumer Sector at Ernst & Young. Thanks both so much for joining us. So Peter, I'll start off with you. You are the co-founder of Zando. Now, for those who don't know, this is an online retail store. You started off here in South Africa. You saw a niche, you saw an opportunity. How's the business doing?
Yeah, exactly. We actually started pretty much exactly 1 year ago. The first
year, anniversary today.
More or less, yeah, exactly. Thanks. So it was a really exciting year. We saw really strong growth in the first year. Just to give you a rough idea, like the month-to-month growth was always double-digit. So I think that kind of shows already now that it's a very strong, big opportunity, even though it's from a small base. But still, like, you can see the market is ready, and it's the right time to actually enter the market.
Tell us about some of the teething issues that you've experienced as an online retailer here in the South African market. And I know that you've also got a base in Nigeria and looking to set up in Kenya.
So, I mean, I think there's quite some obvious issues when it comes to e-commerce, like online. Obviously, when you enter a market that is not established and people not used to actually shop online, it's kind of a trust problem that you actually face at the beginning. So you actually have to do a lot of education that you're a legitimate company. If people actually spend money on the site, they actually can be sure to get the products delivered. I think that's the one side. The other side is always a bit of a more technical problem. So actually, once the people purchase it, to actually get it to the customers within 3 to 5 days, to make sure they have this nice online experience and actually keep on coming back and shop again.
Logistics, inventory management, all of that, very critical when it comes to e-commerce. What's your sense as to outside of South Africa, how ready is the rest of Africa, if we can generalize, for online retail?
I think the biggest problem alludes to the last point that Peter raised, and it's really just around the infrastructure. I think one of the things that enable e-commerce is that whilst it's deferred gratitude from the consumer or enjoyment of the product, if you can't fulfill on your promise of getting it to the door when you said it would arrive, they'll never come back. And from a South African perspective, it's a struggle with our fairly advanced infrastructure and the distance to the main markets complicating that. So I think the African challenge will not be to generate the interest. I think consumers are well educated.
That being said, if you up the prices and can you charge people for that service of getting the product to them in the stated time? What are your thoughts on pricing on the retail side, online retail side? So
anecdotally, as a consumer, as each one of us often do, you prepare to pay it if it really makes it worth your while. If it's the kind of product that you can only source online, there's no other alternative. But I think the biggest problem with our distance from some of the large markets is that by the time that you've imported a single item to your desk, so to speak, the cost of the infrastructure that doesn't exist sometimes equal the cost of the product. And that makes it prohibitively expensive on a one-on-one basis.
But you're in markets like Nigeria. I mean, what's the pricing differential versus South Africa, and how does that also compare to international markets?
So I think talking about Nigeria is I guess a bit of a different problem than in South Africa, because logistics starts already when you bring the products into a country, which is quite tricky already. Like, for example, there's bans on certain products, especially in the fashion area. So I think that's tricky already. So I think that makes it more difficult. I think when you look at the products we have on a Nigerian website, for example, if the product is available locally, we usually price it the same price, because obviously we don't want to price high, because then people wouldn't shop online. So local products that are available, we price the same. If it's an international brand that we bring in new, then obviously we can dictate the price and usually increase the price a bit.
So when it comes to the online space or the impact of the internet on the likes of Massmart, how is that starting to shape up?
So our customers are telling us that they want information. So we're spending a lot of time putting information online, ensuring that we have some good links on site. We are also looking at being able to sell online. We've just launched an app with our Dion Wired store. That app you're able to download, Dion Wired app. It's great, it's got information, it's got products, it's got price. There is a market for it. But again, in Africa, the logistics around it and the trust, it's about the trust of the customer putting in those credit card or those bank details to are they going to get the delivery of that product. So that's probably a challenge of getting online to really take off in Africa.
Another issue that was brought up is the issue of import duties. Is that one that comes up for you, one that affects Philips?
I mean, I think it affects any multinational brand that's importing into various markets, and it's not really, you know, whether you retail online or retail in normal trade. You know, we have to look at and it varies by market and it varies by product. But I think the important thing is we obviously have to take in considerations of that when we build our cost modelling. But the important thing is, are we able to produce and supply a product at a price that matches the value requirement of the consumer? And I think that's really very much the starting point for us, rather than these considerations about potentially bringing in the cost of the product. But of course, there's, you know, as we see the opportunities grow in Africa, you know, this does open up a lot of opportunities about, you know, in Africa development in terms of infrastructure, in terms of assembly opportunities. So it's
local manufacturing,
local manufacture, local assembly, you know, with the various trade agreements that exist. So it continuously opens up additional opportunities.
But how far is the company away from that? Is the company close to considering that it makes sense to produce locally?
Well, I mean, we're obviously sort of looking at the opportunities now, you know, on a country-by-country basis, where we believe we can generate sufficient scale, where we can also support, you know, the local infrastructure and the local economy as well. So it's certainly something that we are considering. We already have a lighting manufacturing site in Lesotho, the only lighting manufacturing site in southern Africa. We've recently entered into a partnership with the African Clean Energy Company, where we're now producing smokeless wood stoves in Lesotho. A first clear product example of really supporting what we would consider as the bottom of the pyramid consumer. So we're starting to see it happening, and I think we can take the learnings from that and accelerate those learnings into the rest of Africa.
What's your typical target market from Zando's perspective? I mean, who are you trying to sell to? Because you bring up the bottom of the pyramid, but then you would think that fashion items are almost edging towards the luxury space.
What we actually try to do is we try to bring any customer that is online on our website. So our portfolio that you see online is actually not just the entry market or the higher market. We actually try to spread it as wide as possible. So for example, at the moment on Zando we have, I think, 70,000 products across 400 brands online. I think that gives an impression already, like, you know, we're not just focusing a certain part of the pyramid, we actually want to be as wide as possible.
So you can create products at that price. How do you sell products at prices that people can afford right now?
So it's from different brands. I mean, like there's entry price point brands that we have online, but you also have like the more luxury brands online. And obviously the spike or like the kind of the faster turning products is obviously at the lower price points.
Yeah.
So that's definitely we can see as well on Zando.
So there's a volume there really, that's coming through. Derek, from your side, is the internet going to be a key factor that retailers need to build into their models when communicating with consumers, and should they be looking at introducing it from the get-go when looking at entering the African market?
I think the role of online is increasingly facilitating an educated consumer to spend as little time as possible literally walking or moving from store to store. I think most consumers will arrive at the store well educated, well informed, they've done their research, and literally they're going to do a transactional deal with whoever the retailers that put the best amount of transparent available information on the web. My sense is that that's probably in the early stages going to be the single biggest role of online from a retailing perspective. And as the markets become more sophisticated, I think you'll find more and more of that research turning into purchase decisions. So if as a consumer you've already built up the trust with your retailer, you will inevitably take the next step. But I can't think that that's the first time that you're going to do business.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back to Massmart. And we're talking about the cost. We're talking about high cost of setting up a store in various African countries. Which country would you like to be in, but it's just too cost prohibitive right now?
So maybe ask a different way. A country that maybe we could have grown better than we have, that would definitely be Nigeria. I think one of our biggest inhibitors is the cost of land and building. I think if we could have solved that problem, we would have far many more stores today. Mm-hmm. You know, we're looking at some schemes. We're looking at doing some joint ventures with the local landowners to try and let them be part of centres so that they can unlock their value over time.
Are they embracing an international retailer like yourself coming into the local environment?
Absolutely. The challenge, though, is they want us to pay top dollar. Mm-hmm. So there's the challenge.
Yeah, and they know that you want to be there.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's, of course, from an online perspective, that's not an issue you have to worry about, bricks and mortar presence. And that means, I suppose, that you can set up a lot quicker in a market.
Yeah, I think what we discussed earlier now is the one issue is obviously the logistics, but I think that applies the same as for online as well as offline. I think another issue that we face more in terms of online is to actually understand, and I think that applies for all Africa, to understand how we actually enable the people to come on the site via mobile phone. Because at the end, I think that's also something you discussed in the first part of the discussion, is that the mobile phone is obviously extremely big. The penetration of mobile phones, I think it was around 600 million, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. And I think the tricky part is to understand how do you actually get the people from the mobile phone onto the website and actually convert and actually buy something. Because at the end, like again, if we have 70,000 products online, and to actually browse through these products like on such a small screen is obviously tricky. Mm-hmm. So you need to understand what's the best way of actually converting people on the phone. And especially
people need to see, if you're selling clothes and shoes, people need to see at least that picture and how long is it going to take them to scroll through. So how are you getting around that issue? Because if you just look at the stats, most of the people in Africa connect to the internet via mobile phones.
Yeah. For example, in South Africa, we can actually see now already a pretty strong increase in mobile phone users. So like, it started at very small numbers, one-digit numbers, and actually increasing now double-digit numbers already. So we can see already in South Africa as well, via smart marketing on mobile phones, you can actually also start converting people on phones.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, and because of the mobile phone generation in Africa, you're having, for example, in Kenya, you're having a lot of apps being developed, and almost a Silicon Valley of Africa being centered in Kenya around technology and apps being used for the mobile phone specifically. And of course, retailers can take advantage of that.
There's no doubt that mobile phone in the consumer's hand is the ultimate way to connect on a one-on-one basis. I do think that people need to change their underlying assumption. You can't rely on a web app or a website to only work when you've got the best connection on an LTE network in South Africa. Your app or your web access needs to tailor for the market that you wish to penetrate. So I think it's rethinking a conventional strategy in an unconventional way, which is going to allow you to find the consumers that you're looking for.
Let's go to the tough side of the equation when dealing in Africa. What do you see as risks right now to your growth trajectory and the kind of optimism that specifically from Philip's side you have around investing in Africa?
I think we're going to see a trajectory of growth. There's no question. To try to predict that by time and by market is obviously very challenging. We are seeing examples of political instability. If we look at recent developments in Algeria, that obviously has implications in terms of the social infrastructure that occurs within that marketplace. We do see some challenges, from a distribution perspective. We had the recent strike action in South Africa that obviously created a short-term challenge for us. So we do see pockets of challenges. Also, the speed at which infrastructure will develop in certain markets, in terms of how we start to connect these cities where we see such an opportunity. The infrastructure obviously determines the speed at which we can penetrate certain markets as well. And I think we also have to be pragmatic that, do we have the right proposition for that marketplace as well? Are we going to add value into the market by bringing Philips into there? So there's a number of considerations, and I think it's about being flexible. This is not business as usual. And it's a much longer term relationship that we need to build in terms of our plans for this marketplace. And it's about being, I think, consistent, in terms of the investment that we make in this market, but having the flexibility that we need to look at alternate options as and when they arise. Yeah. But it's a much more of a longer term relationship.
One of the big issues that is emerging as Africa grows quicker and faster is the deficit gap. I think it was SAB Miller's CEO Graham Mackay talking today on CNBC and saying that the deficit gap is widening. That, of course, is a concern. You've got high economic growth and infrastructure growth not keeping up with that. So what is your take on investing in infrastructure? Are you investing in the supply chain or the logistics aspect, the back end of your retail store?
So the back end we are, trying to make it as efficient and most cost effective as possible. The challenge is, though, is that the infrastructure in countries are not keeping up. So the populations are growing, but the infrastructure is just not keeping up. And that's a challenge. It's costly. The congestion on the roads is progressively getting worse. There are more cars, there's more motorbikes, there's more transport. In fact, only recently Nigeria have just stopped all the motorbikes in Lagos just to try and contain the traffic, because it was just getting so congested that, in fact, we felt in our retail stores, we felt that the consumer just wasn't able to come and shop.
It's almost like, especially because we're talking about generally urban consumers here, but spanning across that, but it's almost like urban planning and city planning hasn't really happened.
And I think it's also about investing the money and thinking ahead and investing it, ahead of time, as you know it's going to grow.
Yeah.
It's not just about infrastructure, physical infrastructure. It's also about people, processes. So we're working with Walmart with their know-how in logistics, getting our product to Nigeria as efficiently and as quickly as possible. But then for it to sit at the port for a week up to 3 months, that doesn't help anybody. So it's also about investing in the processes in these various countries.
Yeah. So where's Walmart specifically helping outside of South Africa?
So Walmart have some great intellectual knowledge on logistics, on IT systems. They're the world's largest retailer. So sourcing, whatever product, we need to take to market, innovative product, it's really all there for the taking. It's about us understanding our consumer, understanding what their needs are, and plugging that gap.
Are there areas that Walmart can't help?
Yeah, I think probably right now it's up to us to understand our customer. There's a lot of data out there, but being on the ground, we're on the ground really understanding. And maybe that's a point to mention. There's a lot of data available on Africa, but there isn't a lot of information. And the information is putting all that data together, understanding it on the ground, and really feeling it. And that's really the role that we have as retailers, is to put all that together and then come up with some consumer insights.
From your perspective, from kind of the industry-wide advice, does it make sense to have spend time in the country, considerable time doing research, understanding the consumer before making the big investment decision?
There's no doubt that in the more developed markets you have an abundance of data points. There's no shortage of analysis paralysis. You can slice the information whichever way you want to. But I think generally speaking, Africa is information poor. And there's no substitute for the good old-fashioned sitting outside the informal market with your clicker and counting physically people moving your information. And
basically seeing whether what you're reading in the newspapers and hearing on debates like this is the truth.
There's absolutely no substitute for walking the market. You need to absorb the feeling, the energy, and there needs to be a wholesale reconciliation between what happens on the ground and the data points. And I don't think that deficit will be as extinguished in the next 10 years. So the sooner you get in country, the sooner you get your hands dirty, the faster you'll know your consumer.
From getting to know your consumer, are you looking at specific tailoring your portfolio or your website for different markets, or what's going to be your approach to that, or is fashion?
No, definitely. There's definitely some tailoring happening already. I think the important thing for us as a e-commerce site is exactly the same. Like, we have lots of data, but I think it's even faster than anywhere else. I think it's just for us to understand how to use the data. And just to give an example, we, for example, look very specific into all our online marketing channels. So we look at how much do we pay for a certain customer to come on our site, and see how is the customer over the lifetime actually spending money, and does it actually make sense to actually buy this customer on this specific channel, because then, for example, maybe it doesn't pay off anyway. So that's a lot of things we actually look into to make sure we actually build a sustainable business.
Yeah. Let's go back to Walmart, because I know I keep harping on about this, but I think that everyone is interested in this because it's the world's largest retailer. And I mean, what are we going to see from that in the African space?
Yeah, I think it's going to help with our growth. Already we're into 2 new countries. We're now going into Angola end of this year, early 2014. Later 2014, we're going into Kenya. That's partly been possible with Walmart. And I think just their know-how, their insight, their backing behind us, and they have an appetite. You know, it's great working with people that really want to see a market grow. They really are there for the customer. They really believe about saving money for the customer so they can live better. And that's something that we really pride ourselves in wanting to do for Africa.
Is that not going to contrast with people or consumers' affiliation with local brands and local flavor? And there's, the concept of Walmartization is one that many have an issue with.
Sure. So we're very clear. Buying local product is part of our agenda. So if we can buy local product that the consumer's after, and it passes the value equation, we do it. In fact, since Walmart, we've probably grown our local purchases in Africa probably by 10 to 15%. So Walmart hasn't stopped that. So for us, it's about getting to market more efficiently than anybody else so that we can help our consumers save money.
Paul, your comments, or I suppose more advice from having spent some time getting to know African markets, market by market, city by city, what would be your advice for those who are looking at the African consumer and seeing an opportunity?
Well, I think the first advice, and I think the comment was very relevant, is really understand the dynamics of the market that you want to enter. As you say, we have a lot of very interesting data to be able to start to segment, but you do need to walk the streets, and you do need to partner with people who know that market specifically. So I think the first thing is to really look at what is required in that market space from a company such as Philips. Then you need to carefully consider, how do you market your proposition effectively? So how do you really start to build the brand? What is a true understanding of what is defined as quality and value within that marketplace? Identify the right partners. I think to try to have a one-size-fits-all, go-alone approach will not work. You have to be flexible. And it has to be a long-term relationship. I mean, we've been in Africa for 100 years. You have to have a long-term relationship. You have to build that trust. And I think it's trying to have that one-to-one relationship with that consumer, because they're so embroiled into the brand and what it means. It's not just a transactional relationship. I mean, that will not work. It's about driving education, and it's about building a lifetime relationship with that consumer.
So 100 years in Africa and 1 year in Africa as a newbie to the scene, and of course playing into a new space that we're all starting to become more accustomed to. What would your advice be to e-commerce players?
So I think there's no doubt about that there is a significant market out there in Africa in terms of e-commerce. I think the 2 main challenges are, on the one side, where you say, how to actually get the customers on the site to actually convert. So that's the one topic. And then I think the other side, actually making sure we don't disappoint them. Because at the end, it's a challenge to actually get the products in the country and actually then deliver to the customers. And I think it doesn't make sense to spend a lot of money to get the customers on the page, and then they're converting, and then they're getting disappointed because...
Sorry, yep.
So they're getting disappointed because they don't get the products on time delivered.
Local partners, do you also see them as critical?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today. That's it for this edition of the Philips African Dialogue. And of course, a big thank you to Paul Hobden, Sector Leader at Philips Consumer Lifestyle Africa, Mark Turner, Director for Africa Massmart, Peter Alistoffer, the MD and co-founder of Zando, and Derek Engelbrecht, Partner and Lead Director for Retail and Consumer Sector at Ernst & Young. And of course, from myself, Samantha Loring, it's goodbye.